Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to talk about the two witnesses. Typically what happens is whenever we talk about the two witnesses on this channel, you always get all the different theories out there that are put in the comments, and that's appreciated and it's encouraged. Although pretty frequently there's the theory that the two witnesses are actually going to be a prophet from a previous dispensation, such as Elijah, Isaiah, Nephi, maybe, and the list goes on. There's endless speculation about these previous prophets that could be one of the two witnesses. And I don't take that view. I'm about to show you why. We're going to talk about the fact that these previous prophets from before Christ and some afterwards as well have been resurrected. Therefore, they wouldn't fulfill the prophecy of being slain, lying in the streets for 3.5 days, because they've been resurrected. They already passed through death. It would have to be somebody that's still in mortality. So we're going to get to all that. First, I think I've shared this a few times on the channel. I'm not sure. But let's start with this. We have two statements, both of them from Bruce R. McConkie, about the two witnesses, and then we'll go from there. So this first one is from Doctrinal New Testament Commentary, Volume 3, pages 509 to 510. And of course, Bruce R. McConkie is a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He says, "These two shall be followers of that humble man, Joseph Smith." So now that's something, because there's always other ideas that they're going to be like two Jewish prophets, which I don't know how that goes according to those people's theory that, it's actually going to be people from Israel, like Jews that are raised up to the Jewish nation. I suppose if they were true prophets, then they would know that Joseph Smith is a prophet, but I tend not to go with that either. But anyway, okay, these two shall be followers of that humble man, Joseph Smith, through whom the Lord of heaven restored the fullness of his everlasting gospel in his final dispensation of grace. No doubt they will be members of the Council of the 12 or of the first presidency of the church. Their prophetic ministry to rebellious Jewry shall be the same in length as was our Lord's personal ministry among their rebellious forebears. The two olive trees and the two candlesticks are symbols of the two witnesses, meaning that perhaps that as olive trees they shall provide oil for the lamps of those who go forth to meet the bridegroom, and that as lampstands they shall reflect to men that light which comes from him who is the light of the world. And then he says something similar in Millennial Messiah, page 390. Oops, got to correct something here really quick. Of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. There's still things that I'm correcting. Like these spreadsheets have transformed over time, and I've changed the format that I use for all these things. And so I'm continually updating things to how I want it to be right now. Okay, he says here, "Who will these witnesses be? We do not know, except they will be followers of Joseph Smith. They will hold the holy Melchizedek priesthood. They'll be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It is reasonable to suppose, knowing how the Lord has always dealt with his people in all ages, that they will be two members of the Council of the 12 or of the first presidency of the church." So again, with this idea of like two Jewish prophets, I feel like whenever people propose that idea that they would be like Jewish prophets that are not members of the church or something like that, and I definitely don't think that that's the case. And I'm going to go with what Elder Bruce R. McConkie says here, that they would be members of the church and most likely be members of the Quorum of the 12 or the first presidency. Okay, so it's reasons like this why when I look at this that happened in 2016, where we had two prophets, because the apostles are prophets, seers, and revelators, meeting with the prime minister of Israel and the mayor of Jerusalem in this picture, and other notable Jewish people that they met with. I feel like this is probably the fulfillment of that. And every time that we have apostles go to Israel in Jerusalem and they meet with people. I think it's the fulfillment of this prophecy, because I think the Lord does things through natural ways and through natural means. I think other people have the idea that you're going to continuously have two prophets that are walking the streets of Jerusalem, preaching, doing like a soapbox type thing, in the public square. And I don't think that's right. I think that this is more likely. I did this video right here called Amazing Words of an Apostle to Jews in Jerusalem, where there's a transcript of the talk that Elder Jeffrey R. Holland gave during this visit, where he essentially taught a lesson about the church and our relationship to the church. He talks about the fact that Elijah has returned, because that's a big thing for the Jews. They're waiting for Elijah. And in this talk, he talks about the fact that Elijah did return. And he talks about a lot of other things. It was kind of like I don't know. I would encourage you to watch this video or read the transcript. I'll put both of them in the description box below. But he taught a lot directly to the Jews in the BYU Jerusalem Center. And I'm sure that there's been other talks just like this at other times. This is the only one that I know of where we have like a transcript. But there's already been a lot of teaching going on from prophets, like presidents of the church, as well as apostles in Israel. So I feel like this is happening. But anyway, let's move on to the idea of how I don't think that it can be a previous prophet from some other dispensation, because they're all resurrected at this point. I'll show you where we find that. Okay, so first we're going to look at Doctrines of Salvation, Volume 2 by Joseph Fielding Smith. Okay, we're on pages 287 and 288. Why Moses and Elijah were translated. From what we understand, why Elijah and Moses were preserved from death, because they had a mission to perform, and it had to be performed before the crucifixion of the Son of God, and it could not be done in the Spirit. So this is why they were translated. This is why they held on to their physical bodies, okay? They had to have tangible bodies. Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection. Therefore, if any former prophets had a work to perform preparatory to the mission of the Son of God, or to the dispensation of the meridian of time, it was essential that they be preserved to fulfill that mission in the flesh. For that reason, Moses disappeared from among the people and was taken up into the mountain, and the people thought he was buried by the Lord. The Lord preserved him so that he could come at the proper time and restore his keys on the heads of Peter, James, and John, who stood at the head of the dispensation of the meridian of time. He reserved Elijah from death, that he might also come and bestow his keys upon the heads of Peter, James, and John, and prepare them for their ministry. But, says one, the Lord could have waited until after his resurrection, and then they could have done it. It is quite evident, due to the fact that it did so occur, that it had to be done before, and there was a reason. There may have been other reasons, but this is one reason why Moses and Elijah did not suffer death in the flesh like other men do. And then also in volume 2, but this time page 293, it says Elijah now resurrected. When Elijah came to the prophet Joseph Smith, he was not a translated being. He was a resurrected being. He had received his resurrection, and he came to Joseph Smith just as did Peter, James, and John, and gave to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery, as he did to Peter, James, and John at the Transfiguration, the keys of sealing power, so that the work, so that the work now, not only for the living but also for the dead, may be done. Since the same ordinances are required for the dead as for the living, these keys also pertain to the salvation of the dead. Okay, so here he's explicitly talking about Elijah, that he's resurrected. So Elijah could not be one of the two witnesses, because once you're resurrected, you're done with this phase of of eternity. You're no longer in mortality. Mortality is the only place where you can die. After that, it's done. You're resurrected. There's one more thing in Millennial Messiah by Bruce R. McConkie. This is page 627. Job's ever recurring question, if a man die, shall he live again, from Job 14:14, has been answered long since with all the finality of a divine ipsi dixit. I don't know what that means, but it's Latin, I guess. Man shall live again, nay, man does live again, for the Lord Jesus burst the bands of death and gained the victory over the grave. And with him in his resurrection, now this is the key part right here. And with him in his resurrection were all the righteous dead, from the day of righteous Abel to that of Zacharias, the son of Barachias, as it were, whom they slew between the temple and the altar. In that mighty host was Job himself. Indeed, with Christ in his resurrection were Adam and Noah and Job. With him were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the holy prophets. With him were Enoch. Okay, I want to stop and point this out because I think a lot of people have the misconception that Enoch and the city of Enoch, they're still in a translated state. And that's not the case. So all these previous prophets, if they were translated, they were translated for a purpose. And then by the time of the resurrection, they all changed from a translated state to a resurrected state. And then all the prophets who had died, of course, were resurrected. So it's once you hit that point of resurrection, the first resurrection with Christ, there's not anybody else. There's no one that would be able to be one of the two witnesses because now they're resurrected. Okay, so with him were Enoch and Moses and Elijah and all other translated persons. And with him were all the saints of all prior ages who had been true and faithful in all things. All came forth in glorious immortality when the Lord Jesus turned the key. Okay? So another couple that I've heard, I think, speculated before would be John the Revelator and the three Nephites, because unlike these other prophets that we're talking about, they were to remain in a translated state until the second coming. So could they be the two witnesses? I don't know. Like, I've never heard that before, but I guess they could. If we think about it, they could, but us thinking about it is no better than just speculation. There's no authority behind what we speculate there. So anyway, hopefully this shows you that if you're entertaining these different people, Enoch, Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, people like that, I don't think that that's the case. And I think it's much more likely, just like is always the case, that the Lord works through natural means. It's not always broadcast right away to the entire world what's going on. A lot of times we don't know until after the fact that something significant occurred. And when you take the total sum of every president of the church and apostle, or even general authorities, just in general, that go to Jerusalem and they talk with Jews and they give talks like this where they're essentially teaching them about the restored church, I think that you have this playing out. As far as two witnesses dying, I know that that's going to happen. Like, all prophecy will be fulfilled. But the question is, how is it going to be fulfilled? And what is it going to look like? And a lot of times people just go to the default, like, most obvious thing that comes to mind and think that that's it, that's the only way it can happen. And so I think that we need to be open-minded and just be like, okay, whenever it does happen, at some point, someone's going to tell us officially, okay, this was the fulfillment of that prophecy. And I don't think we should be surprised if it happens in a different way than what we expect. Be careful with preconceptions and be flexible, because things probably won't go the way that you think that they will. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all. I had something else. Give me just one second here. Oh yeah, there was one more thing. We read in the scriptures that the two witnesses are going to hold off the armies of Gog and Magog. And so you might say to yourself, well, we haven't seen that. Which again, I'm always just blown away when people make authoritative statements like that. Like your prophet or your God, and you're in a position to say that. You're not. So far, Gog and Magog have not invaded Israel, have they? Which we can't even say that, but Israel still exists. They've had a few times in their history where they had an existential crisis. For example, you have the three big wars: the War of Independence, the 6-Day War, and also the Yom Kippur War. Those were wars where Israel could have ceased to exist. So since they didn't, and since a lot of people attribute it to miracles that they're still here, maybe our prophets have stopped them from being destroyed. Have you ever thought about that? They're still here, but they could have ceased to exist. What happened? Maybe the prophet at the time intervened on their behalf, unbeknownst to them, and preserved them. And have been preserving them all the way until now. And now here we are. There's potentially another existential crisis for Israel in this war. And we're waiting for this time when things are going to escalate even more. And they probably will. So I feel like that very easily could be fulfilled already and is continually being fulfilled. The preservation of the state of Israel by our prophet. And then additionally, you know, when we read the scriptures and hear of any interaction between the two witnesses and the Jews, the two witnesses and the army of Gog and Magog, you and I are not privy to every single communication that the church puts out. You and I have no idea whether or not the church has, written to Iran, for example, sent some kind of communication. Is that so hard to do? To send an official communication to a prime minister or a religious figure or something like that? And does the church have to inform you when they do that? That's like this. There's like this entitlement. I feel like there's like this entitlement where people think that they have to be notified in order for a prophecy to be fulfilled. And it's so weird. It's so bizarre to me that unless you're watching it like a movie and you're fully appraised of everything that's going on, then it's not happening. So strange. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.